Welcome back to Visceral, and today we look at the 7-inch by The Moon and Sixpence. It's going to be a little different. We've done a couple now where we've looked at some pretty big records that people have obviously listened to, that you can find on many streaming services, that you can probably buy reissues for on vinyl and CD and cassette and all of that good stuff. But this one today is a little different. What we're looking at is this 7-inch record, and this is my personal copy here. This is a little known 7-inch record by a San Diego band that, for all I can tell, they've only done this one record way back in the 90s. And I think to really understand this, we got to dig into how I came about finding this piece. So when I was in high school, I grew up in the Imperial Valley, and this was in the mid to late 90s. This was, again, a time before the internet was readily available to kind of get music, at least. And for the most part, to discover new music, you'd have to go to a city, and you'd have to go to a independent record shop, and there you'd see all kinds of stuff that you really had... you never heard of before, and you were just basing it off the covers or maybe something they were playing in the store. If you've ever seen movies about record stores from this era, you know that there's a certain type of individual that always works at these shops, the kind of person that puts down the customer, that's very much an elitist and a snob. And there was one record shop in San Diego called Off the Record, and at this point it's now closed, but they really fit the bill for that was the type of music shop they were. Really cool looking people, especially someone like myself who was 16 or 17. You're going into the shop, and these were guys, and yes, they were almost always guys, who were just dressed in a way and had the right tattoos and had the right band shirts that just made you think, I don't know what any of those things are, but they look really, really cool. And they would definitely put you down when you go up and say, oh, I really like Rage Against the Machine, or God forbid you like something like Korn or whatever was popular at the time, and you were asking for recommendations. They definitely roll their eyes and then kind of try to help you find something different. And it was actually in those shops I did get turned on to a lot of music. I remember first finding out about bands like Sunny Day Real Estate and Fugazi, and I kind of learned about those things from Off the Record. So, it was a good place overall. And one of the other ways, other than just asking for recommendations and kind of just seeing what seems to be cool in the music world according to these shops, they would sell records by local artists. They'd have a whole section, and at the time, 7-inch records, that was really the way to go other than CDs. And in fact, what's great about this store is they'd also sell bands CDRs, which was not something that all shops would do. But it was on their wall where they had all these 7-inch records that I really started to just buy things based on the cover, or just buy things that I thought, this sounds kind of cool, it looks kind of cool. They were always priced to sell. They were $2, $3, maybe $4. So it was an easy thing to feel like, okay, before I leave the shop, I'm going to buy one CD from a band I definitely came here to find, and I'm just going to pick up one of these 7-inches. I'm not going to know what kind of music it is. I'm not going to know anything about it. I'm just going to take it home and listen to it. And this was one of those releases. And it's been one that stayed with me for so long. When I first heard it, it might have been one of the first records I heard, which we would call lo-fi pop, which was just, a band coming up with, some pop jams in their garage. But I was really surprised that it was so catchy, and then I kept humming these songs and I wanted to sing along to them. And it kind of just made me realize that, gosh, there's a lot of people out there who are really talented musicians working on a shoestring budget. This sounds absolutely like it was recorded just to a 4-track and then pressed to a couple hundred of these vinyl records, and that, hey, I could maybe do this too. And it's not as hard as it looks, even though to have this kind of quality, it's going to take, some fine tuning. So there's 3 tracks on this 7-inch. The very first one is They All Fell For You, and it's definitely my favorite track in this bunch. Just has a great start with an organ line that just kicks it off. Really, really awesome track. then jumps into a second track, A Naomi, Naomi. It's a bit hard to say, but definitely a track that slows it down a little bit, but has some really interesting kind of both guitar work as well as vocal delivery that has been one that stuck with me as well. Last but not least, The Groom Is Gone, which is just a great way to end this record. You know, again, 3 little short tracks, but all of them just filled with so much joy and so much youthful energy that it was captivating to me. I really wanted to learn more about this band. I wanted to, you know, maybe try to make things like it. I didn't realize people could put out music or records that sounded like this, that just had that kind of lo-fi polish, if you will. I've tried really hard to learn more about this band, and oddly enough, there was a band from San Diego back in 2003. They played at our house, and myself and Craig, who you've heard on the podcast, you know, we had a house in Santa Cruz in the hills, and we'd throw a lot of shows. Touring bands would come by. We had some pretty famous, or rather bands that became famous later on. They played at our house, which is kind of cool, a little feather in our cap. But there was a band that came by called The Anchors, and I only realized after they had played at our house and I had talked to the frontman from the band that he was in this group here. And I never really asked any more about it. It was something where I just said, hey, I really liked that record. He said, oh, cool. I wish I would have asked, did you have other demos? Where can you find this music? Because for the most part, I think the only place you can find it digitally is on a website that we'll link down to below that just ripped this record into some MP3s. Not available on Spotify or iTunes. Obviously, if you don't have the record, you're kind of out of luck. Maybe on Discogs you can find a cheap copy. That's it for today, everyone. So just make sure you subscribe down below and tell us what you think. And if you're interested in learning more about this band, we definitely wish we knew some more information. So if you are part of the San Diego music scene in the late 90s and have some of that info, maybe some demos or live shows, that would be super awesome. Anyway, until next time.